motivation. And before I start, I'd like to make a few introductions. My name is Rob. I'm an independent consultant and teacher trainer, and I've been involved in ELT teaching now for over 21 years. I'm speaking to you today from my little office in Poland. I live in a place called Wrocław in the southwest of the country, not that far from Prague and Berlin. Wrocław is a historic city. That's a view of the city centre. And today the weather is just like this. What's the weather like where you are? Do you have fine weather today? Do feel free to join in with the chat at any stage. So to know what the weather's like. Let's be very English about this. Okay, I can't see any chat coming through at the moment, but do feel free to join in whenever you wish. It's wonderful, as I say, that thanks to the miracle of the World Wide Web, we have people online from so many countries, from South and North America, right way across into Southeast Asia, Russia, and Europe, of course. So thanks for joining us. The session, as I say, is going to focus on motivation. And motivation is one of those most important things that we need to consider in our classrooms. The agenda for the session today looks a little bit like this. What I'd like to do in a moment is begin by talking a little bit about what motivation is and why it's so important. We'll be having a little look at what can happen when we don't have motivation present in our classrooms, and then move on to look at ways in which we might go about creating an environment where motivation will happen with our students. I can see now on the chat there's plenty of people joining in, lots of people from Ukraine, from Russia, from Hungary, from Lithuania, from Romania. This is wonderful. So thanks very much, and continue joining in. So the session will be illustrated today with material taken from the new course, which many of you have probably heard of. It's called Focus. Last week's webinar was concerned with the area of memory. The week before was concerned with the area of meaning. And this week, the third M is motivation. But what is motivation? It's one of those words we hear a lot, but what does it really mean? To answer this, I've enlisted the help of somebody I'm sure many of you know very well indeed, Mr. Jeremy Harmer, and there he is. And from his book, Essential Teacher Knowledge, he gives us two clues as to what we might be talking about when it comes to motivation. The first of his quotes is this: motivation is a state of mind that provokes us into doing something. And he goes on to say that if we want something badly enough, we will act on that desire. Now, I'm sure we've all, at some stage or another in our teaching, come across classrooms where the students look a bit like this. Of course, not in your classroom, I'm sure, but this does happen in schools. And I think we need to think about why this is. What is it that causes this lack of motivation? And very importantly, what does it mean for our students and for us as teachers when it happens? Well, firstly, motivation, a lack of motivation can cause discipline problems. Students become restless, students become disengaged, they're tempted to do things that we don't want them to do, and this can disrupt our lessons. It can cause classroom management problems as a result, and we as teachers have to find ways somehow of overcoming this awful problem. It makes life difficult for us as the teacher, but more than that, it can cause difficulties for other students. It's a well-known fact that negativity and bad news tends to travel faster than positivity and good news. So students who might otherwise feel engaged and motivated can be affected by the negativity coming from their colleagues. And if we don't deal with this somehow, well, it could become permanent. It could become detrimental to the student's long-term progress. Students can end up hating English lessons, hating the classroom, hating the teacher, and ultimately hating English. And once that door closes, there's not an awful lot we can do about it to try to open it again. So let's think about how we can overcome this in two ways. Essentially to try and preempt the problem and stop it happening in the first place. But when it does happen, how can we deal with it and fix the problem? Well, I suggest there are four main areas to consider here. And all of them are concerned with creating the right conditions. Now, it's truism that teachers cannot motivate students. Not in the same way that we can say, okay, go to page 63 and do the exercise and be motivated. It doesn't work like that, obviously. It's ridiculous to suggest otherwise. But what we can do is we can affect the atmosphere in the classroom by our attitude. We can provide the right topics. We can provide the right activities. And very important is we can provide the right level of challenge. I have a question for you at this stage. How many people here do not teach mixed ability classes? How many people here do not teach mixed ability classes? Well, exactly. As you're all saying now, nobody teaches a class that is not mixed ability, unless, of course, we're referring to one-to-one individual lessons. By the very nature, a class of students is going to have differences. There are going to be faster students, slower students. There are going to be students with different interests, different ways of doing things. And as you're saying on the chat now, all students are unique. So we have a challenge there to try and deal with this. And that's the fourth area I'm going to be talking about a little later on. But let's begin by thinking about this area that I'm calling affect and attitude. What does this mean? Well, the danger is that when we look at our classes, we look at the students in our classroom, we treat them as though they're all identical. All of them faceless, dressed similar, with similar interests, similar ways of doing things, similar backgrounds. But of course, this isn't the case. And when this happens, that we should do this, that's going to be a major demotivator for the learners. You see, everybody is individual. So how can we deal with it? Well, a very simple way of beginning, I would suggest, is that at the beginning of the school year, as soon as possible, let's get to know the students' names and let's use them as often as possible. Even use the names in some of the activities that we do. Make them feel included. Secondly, this is something I always try to do, and that's quite a challenge, I must admit, for the teacher, but try to memorize one fact about each student and refer to it. So if you have a student who's an excellent footballer or a student who has a sister in America, we can use this when we chat with students and indeed when we use activities. Demonstrate, therefore, that students are individuals. They're not just a homogeneous and faceless group. That's very key. And another thing, too, I think, that students expect is a sense of professionalism. Now, we are all professionals, of course we are, but we need to ensure that we're showing this into our students. They expect things to be fair and consistent. If we're playing a game and we change the rules halfway through, well, quite naturally, they're going to get annoyed. They're going to get angry. So let's ensure that we remain consistent with what we're doing. So affect and attitude is the first area, and it's a very, very important one. We are all human beings. Let's relate to the students as human beings. It's very, very key. Moving on, let's think about some topics now. Have a look at these. I have a list here of topics And I'd like you to think for a moment, in general terms, about all of these topics. Would you say that your students will be interested in reading about or discussing the following topics? Just a yes or a no on the screen. So have a moment to look through. And we're getting lots and lots of no's. In fact, even one was no, and another was no, 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 no. There's a good reason for this, I suggest. If we go through them very briefly, what they can see in the classroom. Now, this is an activity I've done numerous times. I've talked about prepositions of place, furniture, and then said to the students, right, talk about the classroom. And we end up with them saying things like, well, the wall is blue, the floor is brown, there's a desk in the corner, there's a TV at the front, there's a blackboard on the wall, and before we know it, the students are bored senseless. It's all about stating the obvious, and this is not something we generally enjoy doing in real life, and we certainly don't enjoy listening to it. So if we want to make a lesson based around the idea of prepositions of place and furniture more interesting, we can practice exactly the same language by talking about what students' ideal classroom would be. So suddenly we can change it and say, well, the walls are green and the floor is orange and there are comfortable armchairs in every row and there's flashing lights on the ceiling and a snack bar in the corner. And suddenly it makes it all come alive, it makes it personal, it makes it interesting. Dinner last night, well, it's personal. Students will certainly have something to say about it, but will they be interested in listening to each other? I suggest not, mainly because if we ask students what they have for dinner, they often have exactly the same things. The third one, this reminds me actually of a situation I had a while ago when a teacher said to me, I'm having terrible difficulty getting my students interested in Shakespeare. The students in question were 12 years old, elementary level, and honestly I wasn't surprised. My advice to that particular teacher was, forget Shakespeare for the time being. How about Harry Potter? Something more up to date would really appeal. Now, I don't know much about the fourth one, the political situation in North Korea, and I therefore don't expect my teenage students to know much about it either, or indeed to even take any interest. So perhaps that's something else that can wait. And finally, this is something that comes up time and again in course material, particularly older course material. Fictitious people, people who don't exist, who come from places that don't exist, and do things that are fictitious, are not real. So how on earth can we possibly make that interesting? I suggest we can't. So maybe what we need to think about is a topic area that relates to the students' lives in some way, because none of these really do in an interesting way. So to make it a bit more interesting, what I've done is I've made a little quiz based around some topics that you might find a little bit more suitable for teenage students. So the quiz is very easy. They're either true, false, or multiple choice. So what I'd like you to do now is try and answer the questions. There are no rules, just put in the chat true or false. Question number 1. Which country has the highest ski resort in the world? A, B, C, or D? And the answers are pouring in. The answer is, in fact, B. It's Bolivia. Not many people seem to know that. Quite a surprise, I suggest. So skiing, winter sports, things that students will engage with, depending, of course, upon where they live. Question number 2. This is about food, but here's a piece of trivia that not many of us may know. A lot of food gets thrown away and wasted, but which vegetable do we waste the most of? A, B, C, or D? And the answers again are coming through thick and fast. This is great. Potatoes, actually, is the correct answer, which is slightly surprising because for certain children, I would suggest Brussels sprouts will be the ones that get thrown away the most. But if we take the population as a whole, we're talking potatoes. The next question. Daniel Craig, the latest James Bond. I've had discussions with students of James Bond. Is he the best James Bond, Daniel Craig, or was Pierce Brosnan or Roger Moore or Sean Connery better? But the question here is, Daniel Craig insured something for $9.5 million while making one of his films. A, B, C, or D? And you just about all of you got that one right, I think, or a lot of you have. The answer is in fact C, his body. The films and pop culture. Now, popular culture, of course, often connects with YouTube nowadays as far as youngsters are concerned. But YouTube, founded about 20 years ago, what was the title of the first ever video that was uploaded onto YouTube? Okay, quite a lot of you are putting D, which you would think would be sensible, but in fact, YouTube started off as a very small-scale experiment, and the first video was a film of the creator of YouTube made at the zoo, and it was only much, much later that it developed into what it is now. So, a little bit of technology there. Now then, what about this one? What colour is most often used in advertising to indicate a cheap or value for money product? Bit of psychology here. And the answer is, in fact, according to research, orange. And one example I can give you, those of you in Europe, of course, will know EasyJet, a cheap airline, and their colour scheme is orange inside and outside, and even the staff uniforms are orange. And finally, a totally bizarre question for you here. It's based on reality, though. In which country was it legal to send children by parcel post until 1913? And the answer, okay, lots and lots of suggestions here. A lot of you are going for China. The answer is, in fact, the United States. Incredible. Thank goodness that habit was stopped. But until 1913, you could send your children through the post. What an unbelievable thought. So, that's the end of my quiz. You all did very well, by the way. Extremely well. The question now is, where did I get this information from? Some of you might be saying the internet, and that will be very, very logical. But in fact, all of this information came from Focus, which is the course book I mentioned at the beginning and which I'll be referring to as we progress through the session. Focus contains a huge amount of factual information in the reading and in the listening. It's all based around the principle of CLIL, which I'm sure many of us have heard of. CLIL being content and language integrated learning. It's one of those fairly new buzzwords talking about learning about the world around us at the same time as developing language skills and providing a context for language introduction and practice. It's nothing really new. We find this in education. Somebody comes up with a new buzzword to describe something that perhaps many of us have been doing for a long, long time. For the last 20 years, course books have had topics in them, and as a result, we've been doing exactly what's on the screen. The topics you'll find in Focus, though, tend to be much more interesting, much more unusual, I think, in some cases, than the topics that you're going to find in a lot of the older publications. Here are the examples, just to show I'm not telling any lies. So a little bit about sports, and that's where I found out about the ski resort. Here is the one relating to the second question, which I forgot what it was. The third one, James Bond. The fourth one here, digital firsts. The fifth one, about colours and our shopping habits. And finally, the last one there, which contains fascinating information and very unusual information relating to, in this case, sending children through the post. So I learned something from all this. And I suggest that if I'm learning something, as somebody who's, let's say, a mature adult, I suggest our teenagers are going to be learning something as well. So in terms of topics, let's inspire students with topics that will mean something to them. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that we can't please everybody all the time. It's inevitable, everybody has different interests. But with enough variety, what we can do is at least please some of them some of the time. And I think that's a reasonable aim to stick with. If we make a connection to their everyday life interests, that's going to make things much more meaningful. And intriguing them with things that are surprising or interesting, or just downright fun. And the other important thing here that we're doing with a lot of this material is starting with things that students will relate to, the known, and then we're using that as a springboard into the new. The new, in this case, being the language, developing students' English. Let's move on. Activities, classroom activities. Now, when I was learning languages at school, essentially, I had to sit there and listen to very long lectures given by the teacher, usually accompanied by lots of scribbling on the blackboard, and we were expected to copy it down and keep very quiet. So quiet, in fact, that the temptation was, in fact, just to go to sleep. Not very exciting. When we weren't listening to the teacher, the other main activity we did in class was writing. Writing sentences, filling in the gaps, doing grammar exercises. And the whole idea of using language as communication was not really something that was widespread back in the 1960s and the 1970s when I was at school. Things have changed. In terms of activities, I think we can look, first of all, at a very important area, and that is personalization. We use language to achieve results that matter to us. Basically, things like these. We use language to make friendships, to maintain friendships. We use language to entertain, to tell anecdotes, stories, maybe even jokes. We use language to solve problems. That might be deciding what to have for lunch, or on a more sophisticated level, working out how to solve the world's economic crisis, for instance. We share opinions. We share information. And if this is what we're doing with language in our everyday lives, surely this is what we should be doing with our students in the classroom. So I like to look at activities in course books and apply a little test. It's called the You test, or the Your test. Let me show you what I mean. So even in a grammar or vocabulary practice activity, if the word you or your is in the instruction, it's going to be related to the individual much more closely. So in this example here, the students categorize vocabulary, so they're still practicing vocabulary, but they're making it relevant to themselves in this sense, in terms of their house and in terms of their dream house. In this one, we've got sentences in the present perfect. But look, we have to make them true for ourselves. So again, the language connects with the individual. And in this third one, once again, we fill in the gaps. That's not new. But what is quite new is the idea of ticking the sentences then that are true for the individual. So personalization is a very important part of what we do in the classroom. When we have personalization, the students feel part of it and therefore much, much more likely to feel engaged. Here's another little activity. This one is an adaptation, in fact, from what you might find in Focus. 5 sentences. These sentences, in fact, are all about me. Have a quick look through them. Okay, now there is a catch with these, in that only 4 of them are true. One of them is a complete lie. It's false. So your little task is to try and guess, which you will have to do, because obviously we don't know each other very well. You have to guess which one is false. So could you put the number into the text chat of the one that you think is the false one? Okay, this is looking good. We've got lots of differences here, which makes the whole thing much more interesting. Little point here about classroom management. Getting your students to predict something like this is a personal thing. It puts a little bit of themselves into the activity. And as a result, they're going to be very curious to know if their prediction is right or not. That means, from the classroom management point of view, you're going to have their full attention when you give them the answers, or indeed, if it's before a reading text, then you get them to read. So let's run through them very quickly. I'm going to do them in reverse order. So number 5 is true. It wasn't my Rolls Royce, I have to tell you. As a teacher, I can only afford a very tiny Rolls Royce, a model of one. Number 4 is true. I'm not going to sing for you now. I only did it once. It was a song called Takia Tango by Budka Suflera. Those of you who know Polish will know the song. My version of it wasn't very good. Number 3 is true. Number 3 is true. The former Prime Minister of Malaysia, that was Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, was the guest of honour at the school I was working in back in Malaysia, way back in about 1999, 2000. Number 2, or number 1 now, we're down to the last 2. Number 2 is true. I was at a conference in Croatia about 3 or 4 years ago, and the television people turned up almost without warning and gave me the microphone and asked me to talk about learning English. It was a nerve-wracking experience, but fortunately only a small amount of it was broadcast. Which means then that number 1 is not true. I've only visited Russia 15 times, not 16. But it's about to be 16 because on Sunday I'm flying out to Moscow. So those of you who are in Russia, hopefully we'll be able to meet up next week. So I'll be in Moscow, in Nizhny Novgorod, in Samara and St. Petersburg in the coming week next week. So there's a little activity. The teacher can demonstrate that, as I did. And then, of course, you get your students to write their sentences. In this case, we've got present perfect. You could use this for absolutely anything at all. The nice thing about it is it gives students the opportunity to personalise, it's interactive, and it makes them listen to one another as well. Here's a little tip. Make sure they make the sentences difficult, as I did. I once did this with a group of students, and one of them wrote, "I've been to the moon 10 times. That was a bit easy, wasn't it, to guess that it was a lie. So what we've done there, in fact, we've moved from personalization to also include interactivity. As we mentioned earlier on, typical classical classroom activities in the old days involved solitary writing. And solitary writing activities may have their place for some time in the class, but not for a whole lesson. Students are going to get bored, they're going to be distracted. The flip side of this, of course, is that collaborative communication activities are not always possible at home. In fact, very rarely. So using classroom time for interactivity means that students get the chance to practice the language in a face-to-face way that means something. It also allows peer support, and it provides an element of safety. Working in groups, it's all about improving, practicing, experimenting. If students make mistakes, it's not the end of the world. They try again and get better. So once again, a few examples here taken from Focus. These are essentially controlled practice activities, a little bit like the one we just did with My Sentences. Put the words in order to make the questions, and then ask and answer. In this one, write sentences true for you, and then ask each other the questions. And finally, rewrite the sentences in the passive, and then compare your answers with a partner. So just to summarize and emphasize here, Focus, in my experience, have the most personalization and interactivity in the controlled grammar practice and vocabulary activities of any course book I know. Variety, of course, is another key. And of course, nowadays, the internet is a massive resource. It's one not to be ignored. In fact, it's one that the students use all the time themselves. A bit of research has shown here that using the internet is the #1 way that students pass their free time at home. Right down at the bottom of the list, we've got traditional hobbies like painting and drawing, probably stamp collecting, things that people like I did when I was little. But nowadays, the internet is massive. Interesting here that boys seem to use it just slightly more than girls. But let's not make anything of that, other than to say that there is clearly a huge expectation now that the internet is always with us. My little nephew, not long ago, he's 6 years old, actually said to me, "Is it true, Uncle Rob, is it true that when you were little, there was no internet?" I said, "Yeah, that was true." He said, "That's what my mum said as well, and I didn't believe her." I said, "Now I'm going to tell all my friends." So in this age of digital natives, perhaps things have changed a little bit. Apologies to those of you who might have seen this before. It's one of my favourite little graphics, and I'm going to show it again. It's reflecting the fact now that the internet has had such an impact that the way we handle language has even changed. In the old days, we used to refer to a keyboard and think of a piano. We used to refer to a mouse and think of a small animal. Nowadays, when we teach the ABC, perhaps it's all rather different. Now, I don't understand everything that's on here. You'll have to find a teenager to explain some of these. If you'd like to get a copy of this graphic, you can find it very easily online. If you type in alphabet taught to kids into Google Images, this is what comes up. And as I said earlier on, we've got words in there that at one time may have had different meanings, but now are associated purely with technology. So with this passion for technology, perhaps it's time to think about bridging the gap between technology purely for pleasure and bringing technology into the English language teaching and learning situation. Combined with a fun and interactive classroom, perhaps we can have fun and interactive online practice. Put these two together and we get something I'm sure you've all heard of. We get blended learning. And very briefly, blended learning works a bit like this. We use our course book, we use the audio, we use the video, the e-text in the classroom. For homework, we could use the workbook, but now there's an alternative, something called My English Lab. My English Lab is something that works in tandem with the course book. It essentially replaces the workbook, but it does so much more than that. And once the system's set up, what you can easily do is set activities for your students through the system. This is what it looks like for the student. They complete the gaps in this particular case, and when they're happy that they've done it to the best of their ability, they hit submit. And it's here that the magic begins. In the old days, we would have to mark homework, either at home or in class at the beginning of the lesson. What we've got here, though, is a system that marks itself. Here, the green sentences are shown as correct, the red ones are shown as incorrect, and we've got a score. So the student gets this information straight away. And you know how students are so impatient? They want everything now. In the old days, it was fine. We could wait a week or so after sending a letter before we got anxious about having a reply. But kids nowadays want something instantly, and this gives them just that. Just as sending a text message gets a reply within seconds. It doesn't stop here though, because the teacher can very easily find out what's going on. Sorry, I forgot to mention something here. The students can try again. Once the system's set up, they can click on the little bubble next to the incorrect ones there and receive a little clue. And the clue will give them an idea as to how they might answer the question better. They can do this as often as you want them to, and in so doing, they can see their score increasing. And that in itself is a motivational factor. As I was saying, the teacher gets to know what's going on very easily with this system as well. Here's the grade book, generated automatically. All the students in the class, all the activities they've completed, and you've got grades and scores and even color coding, and that's automatic. More than that, to find out where they're having specific difficulties. So for every activity they've completed, you can click on to find the correct answer that should have been given, what errors the students made, the number of students that made each error, and the name of the students that made the errors. And that's quite a powerful tool, because what it basically means is that if one student made one of the errors, you might not want to spend classroom time for the entire class working on something that's only relevant to one person. But on the other hand, if 25 students all made the same error, you might well spend time in class putting it right. So a few questions coming through about my English lab. They are available with Pearson books. They are meant to complement Pearson books. So, for example, with Focus, if Unit 1 in Focus is about environment, then Unit 1 in my English lab will be about environment and give language practice related to that. So they are designed to go hand in hand. Before I move on, let me just add a little bit of feedback. This feedback came from students in Greece a couple of years ago after having used my English lab, and this is what they had to say. There's two things on there I particularly like, actually. One of them is, with my English lab, I learned how to type faster on my PC. So it's cross-curricular, really, isn't it? Different skills developed whilst practicing English. Honesty there, it says it has too many exercises. From a student's point of view, from a teacher's point of view, that's hardly likely to be a problem, I would suggest. And at the bottom left, it's very nice because computers follow us everywhere, so why not use them for learning? And that's come from a teenage student, not from me. And really closes the loop, which is where I started when we were talking about all the things that students do in their free time. Using the computer is number one. So varying materials, a little look at going online there, and the connection with motivation clearly being fulfilling expectations. Using a computer is often related to pleasure activities. And secondly, it's also about seeing one's score increase through repeated use of the activities. Something else we can use is video. Now let's have a look at this in context. And the context I've chosen here is helping students to communicate, developing spoken communication. In this particular one, we've got the context of shopping, and specifically making complaints in a shop. We can read the dialogue. That's nothing unusual. We can listen to the dialogue. Equally, that's nothing too unusual. But if we say to the students, okay, we're going to watch a video, what reaction do you get from your students when you say you're going to watch a video? What do they say? What do they do? Exactly. As you're all saying, they love it. It's positive. They say, wow. They see it as being something to look forward to. And one of the reasons for this, I think, is because video is so closely connected with what students enjoy doing for pleasure in their everyday lives. So the video I'm going to show you here shows a little dialogue in a shop. One thing you could do with this in class, first of all, is to show it silently, so we can get the students to predict what's going on. Now, I'm going to try using the video that I've downloaded here from YouTube. Let's hope it works. So into the shop. There you go.
Can I help you?
Yes, I bought this dress last week, but the zip doesn't work.
Really? I'm sorry about that. What's wrong with it?
Well, when I try to close it, nothing happens.
That's strange. Are you sure you haven't pulled on it too hard?
Yes, of course I'm sure. I think it's faulty.
It's ripped. Here. Are you sure you didn't rip it?
No, I didn't rip it. Listen, I took it out of the bag, I tried it on, but the zip didn't work. So I put it back in the bag, and now I'd like a refund, please.
Do you have your receipt?
Yes. Here it is.
We can exchange it for a new one.
No thanks. I just want my money back.
Okay. That's no problem. Can you fill in your details here, please?
Okay, so as you rightly say, it's been made especially for the focus series to contain the language that we want to focus on. So as such, it's not authentic in the sense that it's been taken from an existing film or television show. But nevertheless, it shows language in context. Now, that's only the first stage, because one thing you'll find here is the facility for this video to become interactive. We're going to watch another short excerpt from this. And in this, the idea is that the student takes one of the roles. Incidentally, there are subtitles that can be switched on and off with these videos. I'm not using them today, but you might in class, perhaps the first couple of times through, use the subtitles, and then when the students are gaining in confidence, remove the subtitles and work with just the sound. So here's how it works with the next part, and the students in this would take one of the roles.
Can I help you? Really? I'm sorry about that. What's wrong with it? Do you have your receipt? We can exchange it for a new one. Okay, that's no problem.
So we saw there just one half of the dialogue where the students take the role of the customer. We can swap over and let the students then take the role of the assistant. The advantage of this is essentially pronunciation practice, gaining confidence and fluency using the language in a safe way. So you get all the students working together, repeating together, and developing naturalness as they do so. You'll find throughout the pages of Focus, the communication sections, Use Your English, have the same principle for each of the communication situations that we have. So there are lots of advantages to using video. For a start, we've got receptive skills development. So adding visuals to the audio enhances the whole idea of developing the listening skill. We established it's not authentic in the true sense of the word, but there's a degree of realism in there insofar as the location and the ability to see what's going on. It's not that common to actually speak to somebody without seeing them nowadays. Even on chat with Skype and the like, we see the other person. Now I accept that for exams, of course, we do still have to work from pure audio. But a lot of communication is face-to-face or through electronic means, still face-to-face. So there's realism there. There's also realism in terms of language. Gone are the days where we would teach the Queen's English. Nowadays, a lot of our students are going to be communicating with other people whose second language is English. They're going to be communicating with people who speak natural, normal, everyday English, such as the people we've just seen. We're also looking here at providing a model, a very important model, for students to then go ahead and create their own little role plays. And of course, the visual channel is powerful here, as I mentioned, for meaning. And as a result, multimedia is a powerful tool for your mixed abilities. So a little tip here, one thing I have done after this is got the students to think about how they can have a little dialogue about a complaint. And with teenagers, I get them to be creative, imaginative. Think of something that's fun. It might not have to be a ripped dress or a broken pair of shoes. I've used similar activities with my students where they've talked about a dog that won't bark and they've returned it to the shop. Or they've bought a CD with no music on it and complained about it. Or they bought a dictionary without any words in it. So we can add an element of fun and imagination to this. And again, this degree of personalization that we can achieve fits in perfectly with what I was talking about earlier on, with its connection with motivation. So we established that multimedia is a valuable tool for mixed abilities. And we established too that we all teach mixed abilities. This is a challenge, isn't it? It's a challenge to provide the right level of challenge. Because a mixed group of students, we often find there'll be somebody somewhere in there who's finding it too difficult. And when something's too difficult, the danger in giving up and switching off and becoming disengaged is quite high. But one thing we mustn't forget about it, of course, is the student who says it's too easy. So they get disengaged, they get fed up. A lack of challenge can result in a lack of motivation. So how do we provide the right challenge? Well, this is worthy of an entire webinar of its own, maybe one for the future. But one thing we can do, or a couple of things we can do, I'd like to suggest now. Firstly, let's recycle, provide repetition, but repetition in an interesting way, allowing weaker students to catch up. Let me show you how this works in Focus. One thing you'll find in Focus at the beginning of each of the units for grammar and vocabulary is something called Show What You Know. And the idea behind this is to get students to do a collaborative task together to pool the language that they've already gathered from previous lessons. So the idea of a collaborative activity, of sharing, is going to result in a greater output than just students working alone. And as a result, we're being strong and weak together to help one another. In the workbook, you'll also find Show What You Know. This has exactly the same theme, houses and furniture. But in Show What You Know here, the idea is that you give this to the students for homework before you do the lesson on houses and furniture. The thinking there is that they have time on their own at home to catch up And then when you start the lesson, you have a greater chance of everybody being roughly at the same starting point. Another area, and one that often provides stress, can be the grammar exercises. Either too easy or too difficult. In Focus, in the workbook, you'll find multi-level exercises. So one-star exercises are where everybody might start off. But inevitably, you'll find some students go faster. So keep them busy, keep them engaged, and give them a slightly more challenging activity. One marked, as this one here, with 2-star. When they've finished and say, right, we need something else to do now, you can give them something more challenging still. So 1, 2, and 3-star activities in the workbook are designed to work for the weaker students and the stronger students, and to give everybody a chance to remain engaged. Another area, and one that can provide stress, is reading. A reading text for a lot of students can be a little bit daunting, a bit overwhelming in fact. So how can we help here? Well, in Focus, there are various ways. One is that for a lot of the text, you'll find reading and the option to listen as well. So by engaging multiple channels, we're not just relying on using the one. So we can either read or listen or use both. You'll find in some of the text color highlights. This is there to emphasize keywords, and it can make it a bit easier for students to focus on the very important parts that matter. And another thing I would suggest, and I suggest this with all my students, it doesn't matter what age they are, but particularly with lower levels, the idea of tracing with the finger. A huge text can be a little bit daunting, and it's easy to lose your place. But by tracing with the finger ensures that we focus on the little bit that's important at that moment. It might seem a bit babyish, but I don't think it is. And what it actually does as well is introduce a kinesthetic element to the reading. For those who like to move, they can move their finger along the text. So I'm coming to the close of this session shortly. We talked today about a few ideas relating to motivation and the way Focus helps with this. Focus, a new course based around the principle of the 3 M's: motivation, memory, and meaning. And before we say farewell, I'd like to just sum up some of the ideas I've been talking about. The idea of creating a motivational environment. As I said before, it really is about creating right conditions. We talked first about affect and attitude, being professional, relating to the students as individuals. We talked about choosing topics that students will relate to in some way. We talked about activities that involve personalization, that involve interactivity, that involve technology, that involve video. And we talked briefly about the right level of challenge, going that little bit further to include the different types of students we have in our class. I'd like to leave you with a couple of quotes to finish off with. Firstly, from Dwight Eisenhower about motivation. He says, "It is the art of getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it." You need to read that carefully. It's all in the pronouns. And finally, one of my favorites from Zig Ziglar: motivation is not permanent, but neither is bathing. It's something you should do on a regular basis. So on that happy note, I'd like to thank you very, very much for joining us today. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. If you have any questions at all, now is the time to pop your questions into the text chat, and I will do my very best to answer anything that comes up. So once again, thanks very much. Wow, it's going fast. Hang on. Are you thinking of printing a focus book for A1 level? I'll have to go over to Anna, if she's there. Yes, I'm doing some sessions in Moscow. I can't remember what they are, but Monday and Tuesday next week. Okay, thank you. Lots of nothing. How do I get these books in Thailand? If you contact your Pearson representative or go to the Pearson ELT website, they will be able to direct you to the right person to make inquiries. There is a Pearson office in Thailand, I believe. Have any of your students ever created their own videos and shared them in class? That's a really good question, actually, and an excellent thing to do. We talked a little bit about role plays after the shopping video. And nowadays, it's so easy to get students not just to write a script and act it, but to record it as well, insofar as they all have video cameras in their pockets now, in their mobile phones. So that might be something to think about. And a nice way of using mobile phones in a positive way. We spend a lot of time telling students not to use their mobiles, but if we get them to use them in a way that's beneficial, and then to upload them maybe onto YouTube or the school website, depending upon the situation, that can be a really nice way of sharing information. Now we've got lots more questions coming through here. Would you come to Macau? I'd love to go to Macau, actually. I've never been there. Never been there. Okay. Do you think that making advanced students is more challenging than lower levels? My answer to that is yes and no. That's called sitting on the fence, isn't it? I think the problems are different. With lower levels, I think they're more likely to give up because they think the whole thing is too difficult and there's too much ahead of them to even contemplate. With advanced students, we have the problem of plateauing. In other words, not appearing to make that much progress. So perhaps that's another topic for future. I think there are different issues to consider with low and high levels there. Okay. Malta, I've never been to Malta actually. I would love to go, but at the moment I don't think I have any plans to be there. Hopefully one day in the future. There will be a recording available of this webinar if you'd like to watch it again. Okay. Looking anxiously for another webinar. I'll do another one sometime, if I'm asked. Thank you. Okay. What sort of exercise would you recommend for a large group where lots of students don't like each other? Now that's an interesting one, because I think one of the things that's worth trying in a situation like that is to begin by going right back to areas of group dynamics. Finding things in common is a starting point for this. I can't believe that every individual hates every other individual. I mean, you're always going to get some that don't get on with others, but I'm sure that in smaller groups it will be possible to find commonality and to use that as a basis to move on. Again, it's probably a topic for another day. It's quite a long, a lot to talk about. Is playing a good way to motivate children? Definitely. Playing often sounds like an easy option, but playing is an excellent way to develop cognitive skills, to develop motor skills, to develop strategy skills, to develop interactivity. So I'm a big believer in play all the way through language learning, actually. I think adults enjoy playing as well. Can I get the video that you showed? The video will be on YouTube. It should be uploaded in the next few days. We're not actually sharing the PowerPoint, but as I say, do feel free to watch the video on YouTube once again, as if one's wanting to know. The slides, no, we're not making the slides available, but the video will be. Okay, how do I get a webinar completion certificate? That will be sent to you automatically. So in the next few days, that should come through into your email. How can we motivate English teachers? Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Motivating English teachers. I think one way that we stay, or I stay motivated anyway, is trying to move on all the time. I think it's easy to get stuck in a rut when you're using the same material, the same activities, doing the same things with your students. I think one way of becoming motivated, and it's a big thing, is going outside your comfort zone, trying something new, something different. So if you've never used video in class, use video. If you've never used something like My English Lab, try My English Lab. If you've never used task-based learning, try task-based learning. I think that's certainly one way. The idea of these Pearson sessions too is about trying to provide a degree of motivation for teachers. That's certainly something we attempt. By paying them better, that's a bit beyond anything I can help you with, I'm afraid. But yeah, I tend to agree. Okay. Okay, thank you. Just reading through the text. What part of England do you come from? That's a question there. You can probably tell by my dulcet tones that I'm not from London, I'm not from Bath, I'm in fact from Leeds, up in the north. So you've probably heard my vowel sounds are quite different. I say Bath and Path instead of Bath and Path. So yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Which accents are in focus? You'll find a variety of accents in focus. Nowadays, as I said earlier on, we've moved away from the idea of everything being received pronunciation, Queen's English, recognising the fact that exposure to different accents is important. So, okay, more comments about Leeds. Okay, okay. So, Natalia, you have a sister in Leeds. And Rosario, you've been there twice, so once wasn't enough, my goodness. And there is a football club in Leeds. They used to be wonderful, but I support them, even though they're struggling a bit nowadays. It's been downhill since 1972 with Leeds United. The Moscow seminars. I suggest you contact Pearson in Pearson office in Moscow. They will be able to point you in the right direction. If you go to the website, pearson.ru, you'll find the information. Okay, question here. Is the name of the book just Focus? As I'm trying to buy it online but cannot get it. It is new, it's very new, so I don't know if the availability situation is related to where you are and it just hasn't arrived yet. But if you go to the Pearson website, I had it on the last slide, pearsonelt.com, you will find information about it and how you can get hold of it. What else have we got? Yeah, lifestyle is perhaps meant for slightly older students. The idea behind lifestyle is, of course, for those who work. So rather than students, it's more for people who are in employment or and need English for travel and work and associated things. Question from Larissa, does Focus suit Cambridge exams? Yes, it does. There are task types that are very relevant to the Cambridge exam task type. So if you get hold of it and have a little look through it, you'll see we've got the typical reading tasks, matching, text insertion, use of English tasks like multiple choice, close, keyword transformations. So yes, yes. Okay. Anything else? We're going to be coming to Turkey soon. I don't know. And Sarajevo likely. I don't know. I'd like to, but so far I can't tell you at the moment. Okay, for Abia, it's midnight. My goodness, it's 6 p.m. here, so you must be somewhere quite a long way east of here, Abia. This is great. I mean, it is emphasizing what I said at the beginning, how marvelous it is that so many of us have got together today online. So many countries all over the world, and this obviously would have been impossible 25 years ago. So marvelous. Thank you very much. How can we motivate a class of large numbers, more than 100? In which country do you teach more than 100 in a class? No, likewise. I've never heard of more than 100. I'm just waiting. It's an amphitheatre. Okay, it's something I've no experience of teaching 100 students all at once. But having said that, I mean, I do think a lot of the principles we've talked about today will still work. Obviously, you're going to struggle to remember the name of 100 students and an interest related to each of those 100. But I think, you know, in terms of topics, in terms of activities, there's still a lot you can do with very large groups. How to motivate those who have no ambition at all. Again, I do believe that a lot of the principles we've talked about today, whilst they won't wave any magic wands or immediately solve all the problems, I do believe that it is possible to turn them around. I think what you need to do is get to the bottom of why they have no ambition at all. What is it? I mean, some students have no ambition, for instance, because they have a distinct reason for disliking a language. For example, I had to do German at school, and for many years I simply disliked the German language, simply because of the way I was taught. That has changed. I go to Germany a lot, and I like using my German now. But at the time, I hated German. It was as simple as that. And the methodology did nothing to help that. I think the methodology we've been talking about is going to have some kind of effect on even the most skeptical of students. I'd start, to be honest, by working away on the first part of the talk that I mentioned, this effect and sorry, my brain's gone. I've been talking solidly for an hour. The first part of the conversation where I was talking about relating to the students, finding out about them, taking an interest, even finding out why they're not interested, what they want. My phone ring. Okay, any further questions at all? Yeah, you're right. I was supposed to have finished already. So anyway, on that happy note, I'd like to stop my phone ringing. That's better. And thank you all for joining in. A reminder, the certificates will be on their way by email in the next few days, and the presentation will be available on YouTube likewise in the next few days if you'd like to see it again. So, okay, one last question from Imadin. What is it? Wow, it's going so fast, I can't read. Okay, no, we're going to have to finish there, actually. We are way over time now. So, once again, thank you all very much. All the best. Happy teaching, and hope to see you again online or in person in the coming months. Thanks again. All the best.